When Guilty Gear Strive came out, they made a lot of changes to the game. So big ones were things like the Gatling system or how there's no air teching, and another big one was the wall breaking. But that was a couple years ago, and everyone kind of just moved on. Like, if you're playing Strive, you just deal with that stuff. If you don't like the game, you just don't play it. But if you've been browsing Strive YouTube or just fighting game YouTube in general, you might have seen videos complaining about how it feels like the game is very snowbally right now. And that is 100% because of one of the two new mechanics in the game, Wild Assault. So I want to talk about why people are complaining about this mechanic, what I've heard people want to be changed about Wild Assault, and then finally my take, like what I want to be changed and like how I feel about it. So before we hop into it though, a quick review about Wild Assault. So there are 3 types of Wild Assaults in the game. One is red Wild Assault. Alright, so I know it's not red, by the way. I'd be getting flamed for calling it red Wild Assault, but honestly, orange is 2 syllables, red is 1, red is 3 letters. It's just easier to say red. I'm not gonna lie, I'm definitely being lazy calling it red. 2 is white Wild Assault, and then the third one is blue Wild Assault. So red is the most common type of Wild Assault. The main standout thing about it is its speed. It is practically invisible. I'm saying practically, like you can't react to it. It's very, very quick. Cancels into all sorts of attacks. Is backdash cancelable. And is jump cancelable as well. The main strength of the red Wild Assault is its speed. You get combos that you would not normally get on faster, lower level attacks. So attacks with less hit stun. And because it's so fast, it's pretty hard to burst this on reaction. Many characters for pokes don't have a lot of hit stun, just in general. Or they might not have the best cancel options on normal hit. Something like Souls 2S would come to mind, where on counter hit, you'd get some pretty decent return. On normal hit, there would be no way you'd be able to push this type of combo. Where by spending on 50% in burst, you get some pretty interesting conversions you would not get otherwise. It is also important to note that about half the cast has red Wild Assault. So then we have white Wild Assault. So white Wild Assault is actually not cancelable into anything at all. So I'm going to be controlling Potemkin here. I'm going to mash backdash, and I'm going to mash jump, I'm going to mash attack. You can't really follow up with anything. That being said, the uncharged white Wild Assault is +7 on block, and it also has some invincibility on it. Not on the first frame, so it can't be used as a reversal in the traditional sense, but if you have a read on somebody and it's pretty fast at 20 frames, you can use the white Wild Assault to go through projectiles, attacks, anything like that. Finally, this does have a guard crush on it, so they're able to continue their offense, 50-50 with grab, things like that. Specifically, the heavyweights have this, so you're talking about Nagoriyuki, Bedman, Potemkin, and Gold Lewis Dickinson. And then last, we have the blue Wild Assault. So some of the more unique characters in the game and some of the more mix-up heavy characters in the game have this. On the mix-up side, you're talking about characters like Happy Chaos, Milia, and Baiken. On the more unique side, you're thinking about like Jacko, Faust, Asuka. The blue Wild Assault is the same speed as the white Wild Assault, and you also have the guard crush. But then you also get the cancel options that red has. So you have backdash cancel, jump cancel, and canceling of attacks. This one's kind of like a middle ground between red and white. You don't have the invincibility that white has, but you get the guard crush. It's not as fast as red, but you can combo off it. In the case of some characters, you get combos you might not get normally, but it's not as common as with red. On top of what we already discussed, there are properties that are shared by each type of Wild Assault. So one, you can choose to do a normal one or charge it. This is what a normal one would look like. And this is what a charged one would look like. When you do a Wild Assault to somebody, you take away their burst on both hit and block. So if I do a normal one, I take away like 10%. If I do a charged one, I take a much bigger chunk, around like 25%. All the Wild Assaults cost 50% of your burst, regardless of which version you do. So I'll do a charged one first, half my burst, normal one, half my burst. And when you wall break with Wild Assault, you get the same type of knockdown you would if you did a super. So first, I want to talk about why people think it's broken. So there's a couple of things that bother people about Wild Assault. So for the first reason why, we're going to be using one of my favorite characters in this game, Chip Zanov. We all know how much I love Chip Zanov. Since red Wild Assault is so fast, things like this could happen. So you can convert things that you normally would not get super large return into red water salt, lock them out in burst, take them to the corner, and then do your positive string. So in season 2, a lot of characters started getting these positive loops, or at least something they could do where they built your risk up, keeping the meter because you don't spend as much meter as normal because you're doing a fast RC, and you're honestly able to just run this until death. Obviously there's counterplay, but with red water salt being so fast, you have to worry about this all the time until you do something that makes your opponent who has the red water salt burst. This thing is kind of important because you do actually gain a lot of burst back on wall splat, but what most people will do is that they'll just spend the rest of their burst anyway because you're going to go in the positive bonus. And if you look at Chip's burst here instead of my risk gauge, you'll see that it's going up extremely quickly, and it doesn't really matter that they spent the whole burst because they'll get at least half back, maybe more. It kind of depends on what's going on in the game. So one way you can look at it is that you have a really powerful resource at the start of the round where you normally don't, that resource being your burst. Generally in Guilty Gear, you don't start the game with offensive resources. Tension is usually the most important offensive resource you can use. You do usually start with your burst, but you use burst for defensive situations, such as breaking out combos, or try to use the offensive burst, gold burst, to try to really turn a situation around. This specific complaint is really tied specifically to red water salt though. White water salt and blue water salt don't quite have this ability to really speed up games. You can still snowball by breaking the wall with water salt, so you can do this type of structure with blue water salt characters. Milia does this, Happy Chaos does this, Baiken does this, but you don't get it from as many hits as the characters who really use red water salt well. So you're talking about Kai, Soul, Ramifal, Chip. Now, problem number 2 that people have with water salt is that they don't like that it takes away burst on hit and on block. Now, this thing's a little bit more subtle because most people are just not happy with the matches kind of just snowballing really fast from many hits, especially, again, from red water salt characters. But this can help, just this little thing can help change the pace of a match depending on how it's used. And then finally, and this is a pretty common thing with Guilty Gear in general, it's the characters that use it well. In the case of red water salt, a lot of characters that were already pretty good at hit confirming have it. So it's supposed to be like the hit confirm one, but characters like Soul or Kai that we mentioned before already were pretty good at hit confirming. One of Chip's classic weaknesses was he didn't convert very well until a change came where his 6-8 started to crouch, his 6-8 started to force crouch, and then they sped up the third hit of his Rekka so that his Rekka would knock down uncrouch. So if you weren't around when the game came out, he wouldn't be able to do this type of confirm. And in some cases, so Ram for example, one of Ram's weaknesses was supposed to be she doesn't convert very well in mid-screen, but she destroys you in the corner. But she has a red water salt, so her conversion ability is much better than before. But then, I also mentioned that what people are mostly complaining about is red water salt. Nagoriyuki has white water salt, and he uses it in a very threatening way compared to the other heavy characters, especially since he's a resource character, he manages his blood. So by using wild assault combined with other things, he's able to manage his resource at a very advantageous situation, and it was already really hard to get out of his offense. So what do people want changed? The main things I've been hearing is people want water assault to either take away less burst on hit. They also want it to not take away burst on block. There's some people who also don't want it to be a hard knockdown on wall break. The on hit block thing kind of makes sense because they don't want this thing happening where you lock someone out of their burst until you reach the wall. Some people are kind of cool with that, but taking away the super wall break would make it so that it would be much harder to set up these positive situations, right? So those are the 3 I tend to hear the most. But here's how I'm feeling basically. So I do feel like the majority of complaints people have are all applicable to red water salt. So the biggest thing that I think they could do, they're going to do something by the way, because they did mention this. I think the easiest and best thing they could do is make red water salt slower. If red water salt is slower, you wouldn't be able to do conversions like this or this. So of course it's not an optimal combo, it's just about showing how you're locked out of burst, you can't really react because it's too fast. And they're getting this off very practical neutral tools. Things like dash up 2k 6p, far slashes, raw 6ps. By making Wild Assault slightly slower, they wouldn't be able to combo off a lot of these things. If they make it like 18 frame startup, that means they would have to use heavy buttons to convert them into Wild Assault. And in a lot of cases, you'd be able to see that you got hit twice and that Wild Assault would be a thing that could come. The Wild Assault itself would still be really fast, so if you hesitate, you still wouldn't be able to burst. But it would at least give the defender a chance to burst and reverse the situation one time. In the case of blue Wild Assaults, a lot of characters with blue Wild Assault don't really use them for combos. It's not for conversions. They will use them in combos, they use them in pressure, but it's not that common where you get a conversion you don't normally get because of Wild Assault. Baiken is like one of the only characters that have that. And in the case of white, even though I'm a big hater on some of these characters like Gold Lewis, you do have to be fair that these characters kind of need that, and they do have problems in neutral, and this is something they could use to mitigate it. It's very annoying, but I think it's fine. And in White's case, the main problem is one of the 4 characters has an insane one because it's the character, right? Now, if we were to talk about something else, though, there are people who both want the hard knockdown to be removed after the wall break, and there are people who don't want Wild Assault to take away burst on block. So I'm actually pretty open to Wild Assault not giving a hard knockdown. I think from the dev's perspective, their burst is obviously a resource. You're spending half of a very valuable resource, your ability to get out of combos. And supers cost 50 meter, and it's way easier to get meter than burst outside of like gold burst and positive. I think a nice compromise, and this would go in tandem actually with them slowing down red Wild Assault, would be that only charge Wild Assault wall breaks lead into hard knockdown. It would just make people route differently. I don't think this one would be too impactful, but I do feel like it's something they could do. However, one thing that I think they should not change is Wild Assault taking away burst on block. I definitely think this should stay. Why do I want this to stay? Basically, not everyone's burst is equal. So we got 2 characters here, Baiken, Happy Chaos. If I do a combo to Happy Chaos, and he bursts, all of a sudden he's in an amazing position. We've seen many times Happy Chaos players burst people and shoot right away, set up curse, do all sorts of neutral structures, right? But in the reverse case, say Baiken bursts, nothing is really guaranteed here, right? She doesn't really have anything that goes full screen. She's not a fast character. She doesn't have a full screen projectile unless she has meter, right? So she has the gun when she has meter. So what I mean by not all bursts are created equal is, since you can't tech bursts in the air in this game, you get knocked down. There are characters that very much benefit from this, and there are characters that do not. So I cannot tell you how much of my personal matchup strategy against some of these characters, especially in the clutch, involves making sure they can't get their burst back to burst me full screen and just start zoning again and essentially checkmate me, especially if it's at the end of a game. I think this is good. It shows good awareness. It doesn't let these characters, and it's a lot of characters in the game that can act on their burst. So there are characters like Kai, Axel, Potemkin with meter, Faust, Zato, Ram with meter. There are many characters in this game with really strong defensive burst situations. I actually think it's a good thing that the person who's attacking them can prevent this from happening in some cases. As far as the super knockdown, I don't really know. I know I mentioned before that from the dev's perspective, it's a resource. I also kind of feel like they were thinking that there are a bunch of characters who, since they have some type of resource super, like HC and Zato and like Jacko kinda, that they just break the wall with a super and then they build some meter and positive and then do their resource super and then they loop you until death. That they wanted to see what happens if other characters could set up that type of thing. I don't know if that's what they want the game to be. I mean, the game has this reset to neutral type thing. Spending a resource is like doing like a Dragon Ball level 3, right? But I'm not sure that's really what they wanted to do with the game. But overall, in my opinion, I think if they just slow down Red Wild Assault, they'll handle many people's complaints. And they don't really have to do much else, honestly. It is kind of a new idea for Guilty Gear that there's like a really strong resource you have at the beginning of the round that's universal. And it's been fun to explore Blue Wild Assault, because the last thing I guess too is that Red is so easy to use because it's just about combos and stuff, where Blue is It really depends on your character, what you're using it for. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. I've been meaning to make this for a while. We've been talking about it a lot the past couple of weeks. Wild Assault has been the main mechanic that everyone's been talking about since Season 3 dropped, where Deflect Shield is kind of quiet under the radar. Arxis already said in the developer's backyard that they were planning on changing both Wild Assault and Deflect Shield, so we'll see what they'll do. I'm expecting announcements at one of the Arc Revel events coming up. There's both an event in Korea this weekend, and there is an event in Brazil and France next weekend. And they said to expect a patch and a character next month, so there is a lot of news coming. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, again, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it. Again, YouTube is very happy if you watch other videos, so go watch another video. I'll see you next time. Peace out.